You know the feeling. You walk into a room full of people and instead of feeling connected, something inside you pulls back. You're surrounded by voices, by laughter, by the simple presence of others, and yet the space between you and them feels wider than it should. You try to engage, to be present, to be the version of yourself that knows how to do this. But the more you try, the more you notice the gap. It's not loneliness in the way you'd expect it, not the ache of being physically alone. It's something stranger, something quieter. It's the experience of feeling more alone when you're with certain people than you ever do when you're by yourself. You might have started to think something is wrong with you, that maybe you've forgotten how to connect, or that some essential part of you is broken. You watch others laugh easily, share stories, seem to belong to the moment without effort, and you wonder why you can't do the same. You wonder why, in a room full of people, the most isolated place you can be is inside your own head. This is the experience of feeling alone in company. It's one of the most quietly painful contradictions of being human. And the more you try to fix it by forcing yourself to be more social, more open, more present, the more it seems to deepen. Because the solution isn't to try harder. The solution is to understand why your brain creates this distance in the first place. Let's look at what this actually feels like. You're at a dinner with people you know. They're not strangers, not people you dislike, but as the conversation moves, you notice you're curating every word before it leaves your mouth. You're checking yourself. Does this sound smart enough? Is this too much? Will they understand what I mean? And while you're doing this internal editing, the conversation has already moved on. You're no longer participating. You're watching yourself fail to participate. And then the commentary begins. Why can't I just relax? Why am I like this? The inner voice gets louder, and the people around you become a backdrop to your own self-judgment. Over time, this pattern begins to shape how you see yourself. You start to identify as someone who is bad at connecting, someone who is awkward, someone who doesn't belong. And with that identity comes a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. You enter social situations already expecting to feel separate, so you scan for evidence to confirm it. A glance that looks away too quickly, a joke you don't quite fit into, a moment of silence that feels like it has your name on it. And each time the evidence piles up and the belief hardens. You're not just feeling alone anymore. You've started to believe that aloneness is who you are. But here's what the brain is doing underneath all of this, and this is where the reframe begins. You are not broken. This pattern is not a sign that you're incapable of connection. It is, in fact, a sign that your brain is trying to protect you. It's an adaptation, not a flaw. Your brain has one primary job: to keep you safe, and it defines safety not by how well connected you feel, but by how well it can predict what's going to happen next. In social situations, prediction is everything. When you're with people whose behavior, values, or emotional rhythms are misaligned with your own, your brain can't build a reliable map of what's coming. You can't predict how they'll respond to what you say. You can't predict whether you'll be accepted or rejected. And so your brain does the only thing it knows to do when the future is uncertain. It increases your vigilance. It pulls your attention inward. It makes you monitor yourself, control yourself, edit yourself. Because if you can't predict them, you can at least try to control you.
This is not a personality defect. This is your nervous system doing exactly what it evolved to do. It's scanning for threat. And the threat it's detecting isn't physical danger. It's social danger. The possibility of being misunderstood, excluded, or judged. To your brain, these are not minor concerns. Neurobiologically, social rejection activates the same regions of the brain as physical pain. Your brain treats the risk of being left out as a survival threat. So when you feel alone around certain people, what you're actually feeling is your brain's alarm system going off. Not because you're incapable of connection, but because it doesn't feel safe to connect with them. Let's get more specific about the mechanism. There's a concept in cognitive neuroscience called the social pain network. It's a set of brain structures, including the anterior cingulate cortex and the anterior insula, that process both physical pain and social pain. When you feel excluded, misunderstood, or even just out of sync with someone, this network activates. And here's the crucial part. It activates before you're even aware of it. You don't decide to feel alone. Your brain detects a mismatch between your internal state and the social environment, and it generates the feeling of aloneness as a signal that says this environment is not safe for your true self. Think of it like this. Imagine you have a radio and you're trying to tune in to a station. When you're with people who share your values, your rhythm, your way of being, the signal comes through clear. There's no static. You don't have to work to hear the music. But when you're with people who operate on a different frequency, no matter how hard you adjust the dial, you can't quite get rid of the static. You might catch fragments of connection, moments where it almost feels right, but the overall experience is one of effort. And that effort is the feeling of aloneness, not absence, but misalignment. This is why being alone often feels more peaceful than being with the wrong people. When you're alone, your brain doesn't have to constantly assess social risk. It doesn't have to monitor your face, your tone, your words. The alarm system can rest, and in that rest, you can feel like yourself again. Not because you're antisocial, but because your nervous system is finally in an environment where it doesn't have to perform safety. It can simply be. So if the problem isn't that you're broken, and the feeling of aloneness is actually a signal from your brain about social safety, what do you do with that? You don't force yourself to feel connected where you don't. You don't try to override the signal. Instead, you learn to work with the mechanism. And that happens through a few specific psychological shifts. The first shift is to stop interpreting the feeling of aloneness as evidence that something is wrong with you. Start interpreting it as data. The next time you're in a room and feel that familiar distance, instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" ask a different question. What is my brain trying to tell me about this environment? This simple reframe moves you from self-judgment to self-understanding, and it changes everything. Because self-judgment locks you in the alarm state. It makes you feel unsafe with yourself on top of feeling unsafe with others. Self-understanding, on the other hand, actually calms the social pain network. When you name the experience for what it is, my brain is detecting misalignment, you give your prefrontal cortex something to do. You move from emotional reaction to cognitive observation, and that shift alone reduces the intensity of the feeling.
The second shift is to distinguish between loneliness and misalignment. Loneliness is the ache of not being seen. Misalignment is the fatigue of pretending to be someone you're not. They can feel similar, but they are not the same. Loneliness often improves with more contact. Misalignment does not. In fact, more contact with misaligned people only deepens the exhaustion. So the practice here is to ask yourself, in any given social situation, am I hungry for connection or am I exhausted by performance? If it's the latter, the answer is not to push through. The answer is to give yourself permission to engage differently, to speak less, to listen more, to let the interaction be lighter. To stop trying to force a connection that isn't naturally there. Because when you stop performing, your brain stops monitoring. And when your brain stops monitoring, the aloneness often softens into something else. Quietness, presence. Not the same as connection, but no longer the sharp edge of isolation. The third shift is to start building what psychologists call relational discernment. This is the ability to recognize which environments and which people allow your nervous system to settle. It's not about judging others as good or bad. It's about learning to notice how your body and brain respond in their presence. Do you feel yourself breathing more easily? Does your inner monologue quiet down? Do you feel a sense of permission to be as you are without editing? These are the markers of alignment. And here's what the research shows. The quality of your relationships matters far more than the quantity. 1 or 2 relationships where your brain feels safe can completely change your baseline sense of social connection. They recalibrate your social pain network. When you have a reliable experience of being seen and accepted, your brain stops treating every social situation as a potential threat. It learns that safety exists, and that learning carries over, making you less reactive even in environments that aren't a perfect fit. The fourth shift is to stop expecting yourself to feel connected to everyone. This is perhaps the most important. We have a cultural myth that if you're socially skilled, you should be able to connect with anyone. But that's not how the brain works. Connection is not a skill you apply evenly to all people. It is a resonance that happens when two nervous systems find a compatible rhythm. And just like some instruments sound better together than others, some people will naturally harmonize with you, and some won't. This isn't a failure. This is the nature of human chemistry. When you stop expecting yourself to feel connected to everyone, you stop judging yourself when you don't. And that judgment was the thing creating most of the aloneness in the first place. Let's bring this into a simple mental model you can carry with you.
Imagine you have an internal compass. It's not pointing toward north, it's pointing towards safety, toward environments where your brain can relax, where you don't have to perform, where your thoughts and feelings can move freely without constant editing. That compass is always working. The feeling of aloneness you experience around certain people is not the compass breaking, it's the compass working. It's telling you, this is not north for you. And the more you learn to trust it, the less you'll blame yourself for its direction. Most of us have been taught to override that compass, to stay in rooms that make us feel small, to laugh at jokes that don't feel funny, to shape ourselves into versions that fit even when the fit hurts. And over time, we lose the ability to even feel which way the compass is pointing. We just feel the vague, constant exhaustion of being misaligned. But the compass still works. It's still there, and you can learn to feel it again. The quiet truth is that you don't feel more alone around certain people because you're incapable of connection. You feel more alone around them because your brain is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's protecting you from the exhaustion of performing connection where it doesn't naturally exist. And that exhaustion, that aloneness, is not your failure. It is your brain's honest signal. A signal that says you are trying to tune into a frequency that is not yours. So the way out is not to try harder. It's not to become more charming or more likable or more agreeable. It is to listen to the signal, to trust that your brain knows something you haven't yet put into words, and to slowly, gently start arranging your life so that you spend more time on your frequency. Not by rejecting everyone who doesn't match, but by giving yourself permission to stop pretending that every mismatch is your fault. There will still be moments when you're in rooms that aren't yours, moments when the gap opens up and you feel the familiar distance. But in those moments, you'll have a different relationship to the feeling. Instead of collapsing into self-judgment, you'll recognize it for what it is, a compass needle pointing away from what doesn't fit. And you'll be able to be there in that room without losing yourself. Because the aloneness won't mean you're broken. It will simply mean you're in the wrong station. And you can always, always find your way back to the frequency that lets you breathe. You don't need to be everyone's version of connected. You only need to be the version that lets you come home to yourself. And the more you trust that, the less alone you'll feel. Even in a crowded room, even in the quiet. Because the deepest connection you'll ever have is not with the people who match you perfectly. It's with the part of you that never stopped listening. The part that always knew which way was north.